Today, I wanted to start off by saying, how do we discover the essence of life? Is there an essence to life? Have we ever thought about an essence to life? Is it something that's important to us if we knew there was, if we could somehow attain or realize that essence? The title of the book, however, is The Strength in Knowing. The strength in knowing, I guess if you really think about it, we gain a lot of strength in knowing about virtually anything in our lives, regardless of what it is. It might be simply how to conduct ourselves, about a book, about a study that we're in, and the more we know about whatever it is, it seems as though the more strength that we gain in being able to accept and understand for that which it is. The subtitle of the book is, actually, it's really interesting because it's a truth beyond belief systems and a fresh path finding love, peace, and joy in our lives. I'm sure there's everyone in this room at some point would love to have more of love, peace, and joy in their life. The truth beyond belief systems, we all have belief systems about things in our lives, a belief system about how we think we should conduct our life, how we think we should conduct ourselves with our children, with our family, with siblings, etc. Even a belief system on how to operate a motor vehicle for that matter. Some of the belief systems that we maintain are supplemented or reinforced with knowledge, pragmatic knowledge, evidence about whatever that belief may be. In many instances, beliefs about spirituality, about God, really aren't necessarily supplemented or reinforced with evidence. Some instances they are, depending upon the individual. In most instances, it's a belief system based on what we know someone has told us, what we know someone was told from someone else, and so on and so on and so on, down to hundreds and thousands of years of books that reflect about spirituality, about God. So basically, our belief system is about what other people say to us, what we read and what we believe based on that information, based on that credibility, based on the stature and the credibility of that individual and of the books that reflect what we're talking about. If we could reinforce or supplement our belief system, especially about spirituality or about God, it would give us even more evidence that would not take the belief system aspect away, but simply reinforce or supplement it with evidence to help us even reinforce what it is we believe about spirituality, about God. I think most of us would like to believe about God, a life after death, etc., because I'd hate to think that when we leave the planet, it would be nothingness. So part of that's that faction. If that can be reinforced, and I attempt to do that, and I've told and feel that I do with the book in reinforcing that belief system with spiritual events that have occurred in my life and with actually scientific documentation that I discuss regarding spirituality and regarding God. A fresh path in finding love, peace, and joy, is the other subtitle, which, again, there's probably no one in this room that wouldn't want more love, peace, and joy in their life. And that can really be attained, and whatever we have now can be escalated. And how that would occur would be, part of which really reflects, whether you believe it or not, is ego. And that's reducing different aspects of our ego that are negative. There's several negative aspects that I reference in the book. I can't get into a lot of detail today, but to give you an example, selfishness, jealousy, envy, greed, fear of loss of material, and fear itself, and sometimes even hatred. Those are important things that are in some of our lives to a certain degree. So some people maybe not here, some people up here, so it just depends on the individual and how we focus. Part of it relates to perhaps environment, how we were raised, environmental indoctrination, association with friends and family and other people, what we've learned, experiential knowledge. So there's a lot of ways to adjust and focus on this and to make a determination of how we can improve it if we want to improve it. Some people say, well, I don't care, I'm fine, I feel fine with what I am. That's great. Don't worry about it. Just go on with your life the way it is. And there's nothing wrong with that either. If you're happy, it's all about being happy with ourselves. We all seek, to a certain degree, life's purpose and meaning, finding degrees of love, peace, and joy, and knowledge, wealth, and power, all to a certain level, some more than others, but depending upon what it is, I think all of those characteristics are in all of us to a certain extent. The content of the book is very diverse in the sense that there's actually 8 sections and 23 chapters. It's 272 pages, but each section really is independent within itself. Independent in the sense that it's, as an example, there's a section on love, there's a section on consciousness, a section on why do bad things happen to good people and children, a section on cause and effect, and so on, like that. So that's when I say when it's very diverse, that's the diversity I'm really referencing. However, all of those titles that I just mentioned really relate to our consciousness in one respect, but independent in another. Most of the book that was actually written between probably 10 a.m. and 4 a.m. in the morning. And I say that for a reason, because it seems like in North America, of course it's true too, most of the people are asleep at 3 o'clock in the morning in North America. It seems like there's a better flow of energy at that period of time where the universe is open, and I'm open, or an individual for sensitivity, to receiving thoughts that we may not receive during the day. It's kind of like an AM radio station. You know, you got static in a thunderstorm, it's hard to hear the station. When the storm stops, everything is clear. Well, during the day when virtually everybody's awake, say at 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, you've got action, you've got thought, you've got processes that are taking place. People are thinking, interferes with our thoughts, believe it or not, because of all the populace now being awake. So when most of them are asleep, we're more susceptible to receiving thoughts that we may not normally receive during the day. So that was the purpose of writing most of the book at the wee hours of the morning. Tell you a little bit about myself. Phyllis already expressed some things about sailing. Lived in Florida for 6.5 years, had a sailing charter business. It really was a different time in my life. It was an adventure, but it was also an experience. Probably the most unique part of it is being out of sight of land and only seeing water and sky for 360 degrees. It's really unique and unusual, and you have to experience to really appreciate it. But it makes you closer to God, closer to nature, as you might be able to see when all you can see is water and sky. So it brought a different insight and sensitivity into my life, especially sometimes at night in the heavens when you look up in the stars and the constellations. I always felt at times that I was part of that. It was my home at one time. I wrote this book because of meditation. I started meditation in the late 80s, so I've been meditating now for about 25 years. I know meditation has made a difference in my life. I still meditate now twice a day when I wake in the morning and before I go to sleep at night for at least 20, 30 minutes. There was one time I actually meditated for 6.5 hours. I haven't done that again, but that was probably the longest period. I wanted to share the book because of my spiritual events that have occurred in my life, and because of the meditation, what I've learned through awareness in meditation over 25 years. And I felt finally that it was important that I share this. I paint, as Phyllis mentioned, and she paints, and I guess I always felt, besides wanting to be trying to be a good person in my life, that I felt, for me anyway, it was important for me to leave something physical behind of myself. And I felt I accomplished that with my paintings, which are impressionistic oil with palette knives. And then with the book, I felt just simply another means by which I could leave a permanence of me that I felt would benefit some others, like I felt the paintings would. And I think my book will. As a matter of fact, I know my book will because I've talked to people, had emails and letters from people that say the book has really changed their life in so many ways and how it's helped them. They've read it sometimes 2 or 3 times because they seem to get more out of it each time than the first. So I think meditation, the spiritual events, has given me a higher awareness and a realization about certain things that, quite frankly, I have to be honest with you, that I really didn't know. And most of this book at 2 or 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, probably 75% of it was for me, but not of me. I think it came from another source. It came from the universe. It came from God. And I'm truly blessed in that respect, and truly blessed with what I've learned through meditation and spiritual events. It's just so extraordinary. It's changed my life so much and given me so much peace that I felt at one point that I had to share this with others while I could. And that was the attempt and the purpose of the book. Someone told me once, you know how tough it is to write a book and publish it, have a circulation and do anything with it. I said, I'm finding out. It is an arduous task. But quite frankly, I told this person if I finished the book and I made a positive difference in one life, then the book was worthwhile. And I really truly felt that. It's not that I don't want to make money. Of course I'd like to make money. We all need money to pay bills, and we all want to have more money. So yeah, I'd love to make money too, but that wasn't the purpose. But if I can gain that, that certainly will be nice too. And it's starting to pay off. And I guess it's because of my sincerity and the content of the book that can be so dramatic. Some people say even overwhelming. And I take that as a compliment when they tell me overwhelming. That it brings some people to a visceral and primal level. And I think that's good. You know, if there's many things in life that isn't for everybody, and self-improvement or consciousness and sensitivity is something that some people feel they have enough of, don't want any more, and that's their choice, and that's fine. Anyway, the vision I wanted to explain to you is that it was with my first wife. This was in 1987. It seems like a lot started in 1987 for whatever the reason is. And it was in February 1987, ironically. And we lived in West County. We had a home. I was lying in bed reading. And I was sitting up in the bed reading with my back to the headboard of the bed for about an hour. And then out of my peripheral vision, I saw something on the bathroom door, which is about 25 feet away, I suspect. And it was a vision on the door of a man's face. It's as though you take a thin piece of chalk, maybe a 1/4 inch, and drew an outline with the chalk. That's what the vision looked like. And it was a torso, actually from here up. It was larger than lifelike on a brown bathroom door about 25 feet away or so. And I thought to myself, what is this? What is happening to me? What am I seeing? And it was the face of a man with a mustache and a goatee. He had long, stringy, shoulder-length hair and a cloth wrapped around his forehead. And there were blue and white particles swirling right at his neck area. And I thought, oh my God, what is... The first thought that popped in my head as to what it was is that I thought it was Jesus. Jesus. Oh, couldn't believe it. I can't believe, every bone in my body was frozen. As I stand there on the stage to tell you this, I couldn't move a bone in my body. And the next thoughts that popped in my head there were 3. One, I was going to die. I guess this meant I was going to die. Or the world was coming to an end. Or perhaps I was destined to do something different with my life. Perhaps for society, perhaps maybe even for mankind in some sense. It wasn't a feeling of grandeur at the time. It's just those are the thoughts that popped in my head. And I had no idea that 25 years later I'd be standing here or standing on another stage, which I've done, and talking about this book now. Because at the time these things occurred, this event occurred, well, anyway, my wife walked in the room and she started talking, and I didn't know whether I should say anything to her or not. She really wasn't very spiritual, so I chose not to for whatever reason. She finally finished, and I said, with a belated goodbye, okay, and she left. And as I looked up again, the vision was beginning to diminish. I jumped up, ran to the door, touched it. As I touched it, it finally was gone completely. And I went back and sat on the edge of the bed and was kind of in a semi-catatonic state, wondering, can I go to sleep tonight? Am I going to die? Or should I stay up all night or what? I didn't really know what was going to, it was that real. And I talk about in the book about some other aspects of understanding what's real and what isn't, as far as dreams and reality, as far as what somebody might call hallucinations and an actual vision that is in our fact, our reality. And you can distinguish the difference, and I talk about that in a couple papers I've written, and I also talk about that in the book to some extent. But you can distinguish that, I believe. That we can distinguish the difference in dreams and reality, just as we can distinguish the difference between hallucinations and a vision. So, a few things happened after that. We were seeing a therapist for marriage counseling, and some other events occurred that were tied into that, and so much, so I can't really get into all of it today, but there was an out-of-body experience that I had that related to a higher level of consciousness on a higher plane, and I didn't know if I wanted to stay there or come back to Earth in that sense for where I was, when I talk about that a great deal too. But I want to be jumping around because everything is so diverse, so I'm trying to cover as much as I can in a short period of time. But we all have a flesh and bone body, we know that, and we all have organs, we all have arteries, we have veins, we have tissue. All of this they're all independent of each other, but they all work in a synchronicity, because that's how our body functions. The heart works with this part, and the liver does this, the kidneys do that, and they all work. However, I use this as a metaphor, but when you get into your car, the car that has all the bells and whistles tells you when you're almost out of gas. You got a GPS system, you got a video camera, you got everything on the car, but nothing works. Nothing works until you put the key in the ignition and crank it. It's totally useless. And so are all these organs in our body, totally useless unless there's something called a life force. A life force that is the ignition to all this body operational and making it operational. That life force is probably more easily explained spiritually than it is physiologically, as I think you'll agree. In a sense, everything is imperfection. There might be people that don't look like other people, and they have some imperfection in their body, but overall, the body itself is an entity that, because it is imperfection, even though it changes with age, that's part of the process of its perfection. If we're created in God's image, then we have choice, because God had choice. So we have choice. I say God's image, but obviously not his physical image, but his consciousness image, his spiritual image, the soul that we have in our bodies. Consequently, or subsequently, I should say, because we have choice, we have the ability to choose, and sometimes what we choose may not be appropriate for what we really want and what the outcome may be. So sometimes our choices can be not good choices, and sometimes they can be good choices. But it's, again, jumping back, it's all about, as far as I'm concerned, if you really analyze this, it is all about ego reduction, because ego is really the arch nemesis of our happiness and our peace in our lives. And we can reduce those negative aspects of the ego that I mentioned, then we're going to be on a road to peace and more happiness in our life, more joy in our life, and more understanding. And it's about being more understanding to the universe and more sensitive to the universe and sensitive to other people is part of it. Yeah. Sure, I've heard that before. It really doesn't work. But you know what? It does. If you can do this, and if you can focus, and if you can have the dedication to take the time, there's an expression in the Course in Miracles about, if you've ever read the Course in Miracles, it's a great book, and it goes like this: infinite patience brings immediate results. And if you have infinite patience, it doesn't make any difference when the results come. So, good things don't come easy, and good things don't come quickly, generally speaking. A classic example of what I'm talking about is, as far as kindness is concerned, there's been a lot of studies done on kindness, by the way, too. And I talk about that in the book quite a bit. and how kindness and being altruistic, seeing someone do kind acts makes us feel good. When you go into a store and you approach a clerk, whether it be at a register or a service counter, and you walk up and you're a customer, and for whatever reason, they're not nice. Matter of fact, they act like they're doing you a favor. And when that happens to me, what I do is I'll say, excuse me, did I say something to upset you, or did I do something to upset you? Oh, no, not at all. Well, I just had that feeling. Oh, I'm sorry, this last customer I had, or I'm really having a bad day, or I couldn't sleep last night. Forgive me, sir, I'm sorry. Well, they do a 180, and that happens 99.9% of the time. And guess what? If I turn that person's attitude around for me and for someone else, and maybe that course of that day, maybe that week, maybe even their lifetime, can you imagine the causal relationships? Now this person, because I was turning them around, they did a 180. Now they're nice to everybody else that day, I would like to think. And those people that they're nice to, perhaps are nice to other people, and so on and so on and so on. So it's a continual thing. It's exponential. It can be exponential. And it's so logical, it's so easy, it's so realistic that if more people would put this technique into work, the world would be a much better place, much better place. Again, it goes back to reducing ego. Most stress is related to perception. I know you've all experienced this before too. A friend, a relative, a coworker, somebody you know was stressed about something in their life. It doesn't make any difference what it is. They were stressed about something. You know whatever that was that they're stressed about wouldn't bother you in the least. Not the least. Or vice versa. Therefore, it's not the situation that's stressful. It's how one perceives the situation. So life is about perception. A good phrase for that, remembering that is, it's not what we see, but rather how we see it. Everybody sees things in a different way. It depends on how we perceive things is going to determine what the outcome is going to be and how we react. Sometimes it's as critical to our reaction to a situation as critical how we react is to the situation itself. So understand that perception is all about, or stress is all about perception, and try to think about that scenario that something doesn't bother you and bothers somebody else. Now, when something starts to disturb you, perhaps you can think about, hey, I'm not going to let this bother me. And there's another expression in the Course in Miracles that kind of relates to this too, and that is, I can choose peace rather than this. So whatever it is in our life that's disturbing us, we still have choice. We still have choice that we don't have to be in the situation that they're in and be stressed. I can choose peace rather than this. And you can choose peace rather than this. And it's a matter of focus and determination and not allowing negative issues to disturb you in the sense that I'm talking about those. You know, going back to understanding ourselves and how it's important to understand ourselves, and I think we can learn more about understanding who we are and what's important for us in our lives, because there's so many times that we delude ourselves about what's true and what isn't based on the fact that we don't want to face certain things. So we tell ourselves, I'm not going to deal with that right now, or that's really not happening to me, but in reality that it is, but we just don't want to face it. Sometimes it's better to face things on the onset, get it over with, deal with it, because then you've got the delayed gratification of not having to deal with it at a later period of time. Delayed gratification is great. Get your negative things out of the way in the beginning so you can appreciate what's coming down the road much more and not having to deal with something negative down the road. What makes us think we know about ourselves until we study ourselves? And meditation or introspective thought can help us make determinations about ourselves that we may not even be aware of that's happening in our lives. You know, when we buy an appliance, coffee pot, whatever it is, comes with an instruction manual. This is how you set it up, this is how you start it, this is the buttons you push to get this. You want a timer to come open up in the morning, that's fine too. If you go to the grocery store, anything that's packaged other than vegetables or fruit, they all have ingredients. It tells us what's in the product, how many calories it is, what the percent is of this, how the blah, blah, so on, down the line. Everything we purchase has either instructions or ingredients. So what would make us think that we don't have ingredients that we need to determine what the ingredients are that we have? And the way to make that determination is doing an evaluation of ourselves through introspective thought or through meditation. When I say introspective thought, how that relates to meditation is different. You're sitting in a chair in your room, at home, in a comfortable chair, a couch, whatever, no noise, no distractions, no things that would distract you from your thought, no TV, no radio, nothing. And you just sit there and you think. Some people say, I can't do that, I get bored. Well, maybe it's boredom, maybe it isn't boredom. Maybe you just don't want to think about certain things, or maybe it is being bored to you. So I'm not saying you must do this, but I'm saying this is a means by which, if you have a difficult time meditating and are interested in learning more about yourself and your psyche and about some deluded thoughts that you may have or may not have, then that's the way to learn about them. And I go into a little more detail about in the book about introspective thought and how it's important to think about, have space to ourselves. You know, I really am mixing all this together. It's probably just as well with the time frame, but you know, have you ever thought about what words would be like on a piece of paper or in a book if there wasn't any spaces between the words? Even the letter A needs a space before and a space after for us to understand that it's an A. If there was no spaces, we couldn't really determine what it was we're trying to read, because it would be unreadable. The same thing applies with music. If there weren't space between the notes, music would simply be noise. And so that's why I feel we need this space in our daily lives. Sometime, 10, 15 minutes a day, even 2 or 3 days a week, for meditation or introspective thought, to give us the kind of space we need so our lives have more meaning, just like the music and just like the words have more meaning because of the space. All Buddha really teaches is learning about yourself and different means in which to do that. You know, the Buddha left a wealthy family. He was a rich guy, left a wealthy family. He died at a young age, at 44, in about the year 1226. And he just wanted to be on his own and be spiritual and learn more about the universe and about himself, and that was what was important to him at the time. So it's not about necessarily being destitute, because there's a lot of wealthy people that don't have the happiness they think that the wealth was going to bring them, the monetary wealth, that is. Buddha has 5 collectives that he talks about: consciousness, feeling, form, thought, and choice. We all have consciousness, feeling, form, thought, and choice. And they're all important aspects of our life. They're all important aspects of our makeup. And we know how we function with all those 5 collectives. I came up with 5 collectives as part of the Buddha's consciousness, which is really subordinate to what the Buddha preaches. Regarding consciousness and subordinate or sub-aspects of the Buddha's collective of consciousness, I feel are patience, awareness, purpose, sensitivity, and tolerance. If we could have more patience, awareness, purpose, sensitivity, and tolerance in our lives, what a different individual we would be, and what a different planet this would be if people could only bring those levels up to a level wherever they are now, simply higher than wherever they are, and that in itself is going to be a positive event in itself. Patience, again, patience is a virtue. Again, the Course in Miracles, infinite patience brings immediate results. Awareness, I think we all want more awareness. If we could find more awareness, we'd love to have more awareness. And the means by which to do that is ego reductions of those negatives I mentioned, meditation, introspective thought. Again, even if it's 10, 15 minutes a day, 2 or 3 days a week, if you're not doing it now, whatever you do is going to be a plus. Purpose. We all want to feel like we have more purpose in our life. I always felt like life should have more purpose and meaning, and now I know what it means, and now I know what the purpose is. Purpose is something else that Phyllis has talked about in many of her sermons. Purpose is being on a path that we enjoy. It might be our work, it might be our retirement, it might be something that interests us that, and it's always been referred to a lot of times, that little voice sometimes calling to you, you should do this, you should do this, but we really don't listen to it. But I found a means by identifying sometimes what our purpose might be, might simply saying to ourselves, if I could do something in my life, anything, if I could do something in my life, anything I knew I couldn't fail at whatever that was, what would it be? If I could do anything in my life and I knew I couldn't fail, what would it be? My parents always wanted me to be a physician. I really didn't want to be a physician. I guess I could have been a physician. I didn't have the dedication, the fortitude. I may have had the intelligence, I don't know. But I think it's important that we live our life not based on other people's expectations, regardless of who they are. Our parents love us, they want the best for us, our families want the best for us, but our life is our life, and we shouldn't lead our life based on others' expectations. We should live our life based on what we want to do and what our expectations are in our life and what's important to us. So that's what I feel about purpose. What I wanted to say about that changing course is, I remember when I was in Florida, and I'll do this quickly, I had some passengers. I was going through a channel. We went aground. The water was supposed to be deep enough. I know the draft of the boat, how much water the boat needs, and chart said it was fine. It wasn't. It had to be towed out. 2 weeks later, I was in the same place with some more people. Checked the chart. The water was higher this time. It looks like the channel was deeper on the starboard side and the right side than it was in the center, so I took that, went aground again. Couldn't believe it. The third time, is a couple, 3 weeks later, this was a high tide. You know, there's high tides where the moon affects tides, and sometimes you'll have a high that doesn't last very long, but it lasts long enough. So I knew I was okay this time. Guess what? I wasn't. Went aground a third time. The next time I was in that area, you know what? I took another channel. Took another channel. And sometimes we make the same mistakes over so many times, and we may take us one time or two times to change course or take another channel, and that's what we have to do in our lives sometimes. And I know we've all made the same mistakes on occasion more than once, and so we need to know sometimes when we have to take another course, take another channel, make adjustments in whatever it is we're trying to accomplish or achieve in our lives. And of course, that'll make a difference. Sometimes it's tough to know when to change course because some people don't like change. But we don't want to make the same mistakes again either. Here's another classic example of what I'm talking about. You got a Mao Zedong, an Adolf Hitler, and a Joseph Stalin, compared to, say, Jesus, Moses, and Buddha, or Muhammad. The disparity between these levels of people is astronomical. It's almost the antithesis of one another. So what makes these guys so bad and these guys so bad and these guys so good? It's this level of consciousness that's instilled in part of this process and learning process and this technique of kinesiology, that in latter periods of the trimester, consciousness or the soul is instilled in the embryo in the latter period of the third trimester, are just at birth, at that conception point. And that's when consciousness, that's when God inserts the soul into the embryo. Now this could be a baseline of consciousness that's down here. I mean, sometimes, and then anyway, Hawkins determined that there's levels and did it with a logarithmic scale, determining different levels of consciousness. And the medium level of consciousness was integrity. If you're below integrity, which he classifies as a level 200, then you've got some issues. If you're above 200, then you got a chance to really elevate your level of consciousness. If you're below 200, it's going to be more difficult. And I suspect that's where Hitler, Stalin, and Mao Zedong, Osama bin Laden, all these guys were below the level of integrity. Sometimes they can raise that level. It's more difficult at that level, low level. But if they focus enough, they can. But sometimes they just don't have the desire to do it. And that's why we have criminality. That's why we have totalitarianism in some people. And that's why there's bad people on the planet. Lao Tzu is the head librarian of China 2,500 years ago. Lao Tzu wrote a treatise called the Tao Te Ching. And there's one aspect of this that always stuck out in my mind of the Tao Te Ching, and that is, first of all, Asians call their teachers masters. So this student, in the course of the Tao Te Ching, asked his master, or his teacher, "Master, what is real?" And the master replied to the student, "That which is real never changes." And if you think about that phrase, that which is real never changes, everything on the planet changes. Mountains, rivers, streams, we change, we grow older, trees change, everything changes. The only permanence in life really is impermanence. There's one thing that doesn't change. The immortal soul doesn't change. However, the immortal soul, I believe, changes to a certain extent internally because it can gain more awareness each time it returns to earth for another lesson. So many aspects of our life, including relationships. Sometimes people get in the same relationship for the same reasons over and over and over again. They don't know why, they seem to attract the same person. And that's something else that could use some thought if someone's interested in making a change and changing course. Everything I'm talking to you about, I was basically guilty of myself. I was always codependent. I was always in another relationship before I got out of the current relationship because I didn't want to be alone. I overcame that by learning about myself through meditation and introspective thought. I was selfish. I satisfied personal needs at the expense of other people. It's not that I wasn't nice to them, and I might not have told them I loved them, but I was in a relationship for other reasons. And I finally said, I'm not going to settle for less in my life than I want anymore. Finally, it took 55 years to realize that and learn that. And that's why I'm sharing this now, so maybe I can make a difference in somebody's life. Our changes in our body and when we age and how the planet ages and trees and vegetation age is all part of the perfection of that entity. The leaves fall, the branches fall. That's part of the perfection of whatever it is that is. The evidence now that comes into supporting the existence of God is DNA. The science of DNA and its integrated complexity has converted so many atheists to, if nothing, at the very least, agnosticism, but some even believing in a superintelligence. I think there's a great deal that we can respect in many people and what they say and what they do, but I think, in essence, what we learn from these people is that we're really, in reality, our own teacher, and we're our own guru in that sense, too. Our life is based on opposites, and it's based on duality. And, you know, if we didn't have bitter, we couldn't appreciate sweet. We need opposites or duality to appreciate, understand, value, and distinction in our lives. If we didn't have bitter, we couldn't appreciate sweet. If we didn't have good, or rather if we didn't have bad, we really couldn't appreciate good, because we need bad to know good. And some people would say, oh, if the world was a different place, if it was only a better place, if this didn't happen, if that didn't happen, if we didn't have all this turmoil that's going on in the Middle East right now, or everything that's occurring, what a different place it would be. Why does it have to be this way? Well, again, God gave us choice, and that's part of the reason that some people don't make the right choices, unfortunately. But we do need opposites to create duality. In our reality, in the true reality, we really don't need opposites, but that's another story another time. But at any rate, if we didn't have bitter, we couldn't appreciate sweet. If we didn't have bad, we couldn't appreciate good. And if you could imagine the world or the planet with only good and no evil, no bad, good wouldn't even have the same meaning anymore, because there'd be no distinction. There'd be nothing to compare it with. I couldn't say, if, for instance, if we had everything was good and there's no bad, there'd be no fire departments, no paramedics, no hospitals, no insurance companies, no lawyers, no doctors. We wouldn't need any of that. All those help agencies wouldn't be needed at all if everything was good. It's interesting because, you know, all that good, if we didn't have any good, if we didn't have any bad and everything was good, like I mentioned, which is even hard to comprehend because we're so used to duality, we're so used to opposites, long, short, up, down, left, right, love, hate. I couldn't say to you, I really feel good today about myself. Because I couldn't feel good about myself if I couldn't feel bad about myself. So we need opposites in our lives to appreciate, understand value and distinction in our lives. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it isn't. If everything was good and there was no evil, there wouldn't be any individuality on the planet. We couldn't be independent. We couldn't feel individual. It would be mundane. It'd be like, I think that's another reason I feel, which is the ultimate duality or the ultimate opposite, is why we die. Somebody asked me once why we die. Why do we die? Why do we have to die? We love our life. Everything is so wonderful. Everything is so great, and then we have to leave. Why do I have to do that? I think we die to appreciate life. If we didn't die, we couldn't appreciate life. If we lived infinitely and forever, what kind of appreciation would life be? Just as what kind of appreciation would we have if there was no evil and we only knew good? So, talking about evil again and about free will, perception and duality, I don't know if you guys ever thought about this, but when God gave Moses the 10 Commandments and he descended down Mount Sinai, did you ever think about this? Not only did he give us choice, but even in the 10 Commandments, the last 5 commandments are negative. They're evil. Why would he give us evil if he didn't expect some people to choose evil and choice? Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not create adultery, thou shalt not bear false witness to thy neighbor, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's possessions. All bad stuff. He knew where some people are not going to be good. They were going to choose bad. He said it in the beginning. It's an interesting concept to think about the 10 Commandments that way, but it was from the very beginning. We take so much for granted. Everybody's life is relative to them, and whatever's important to them, however insignificant that might be to somebody else who has greater problems, it's still relevant to us because it's us. But keep this in mind, if you've never heard this Persian phrase before, I'm sure some of you may have heard this, but it goes like this. It's an old ancient phrase. I cried because I had no shoes until I saw a man that had no feet. It just makes us think about how fortunate we are and how relevant everything is to everybody else and how relevant it is to us, and whatever it is we have is our importance because it's us. But compared to others, it's so insignificant. Why do bad things happen to good people and children? You know, there's 3 categories of events in life. There's known causes, there's probable causes, and there's unknown causes. And those are the 3 categories of events that can occur in our lives. Somebody has bad brakes on a car, has an accident. Is it the car's fault, the person's fault driving it because the brakes are bad? Is it God's fault? It's not God's fault. They knew the brakes were bad. They had the accident. God had nothing to do with it. Drunk driver crosses the double yellow line, comes across the oncoming cars, has an accident, hurts somebody, maybe even worse. Not God's fault. It's the driver's fault for drinking. Or is it the car's fault for being invented? Or is it the alcohol people who invented the alcohol? You know, I get back into, you can get into causal relationships, and what really causes something isn't necessarily the direct cause, it's a conceptual cause from whatever it was inception that brought everything to where it is right now, and it's a little more complicated. I'm not going to talk about it right now. Then there's the tsunami of 2004. The tsunami of 2004, which killed 230,000 people in Sumatra, Indonesia, was the epicenter of the earthquake. It was a tsunami that killed the people, but the earthquake, the epicenter, was the secondary cause of the tsunami, and the primary cause was I shouldn't say primary, but one of the causes was of the earthquake was a shifting of the tectonic plates in that area. What caused the shifting of the tectonic plates? Was it God? Was it perhaps underground nuclear testing? What was it? Something. Or was there no apparent cause at all? History doesn't necessarily disclose its alternatives. We never really know what alternatives are if we hadn't been at a certain place at a certain time or done a certain thing at a certain time. Even in the darkest place, the light of a single candle can be seen far and wide. We all have the ability to make a change in our life and on the planet, as insignificant as it may seem, even like the clerk turning the clerk around and making a 180. What we may think to be insignificant could be monumental. Totally monumental. We may not even have a clue of the contribution we made to a group, to the planet, or even mankind. Something simple, just like being nice to somebody, can make all the difference on a planet, believe it or not. We have the ability to focus. We have the power to make a difference in some fashion. It's simply a matter of focus, determination, and taking action. Empirical knowledge plus truth, plus the morality of the truth. Because you can have a truth, but it doesn't necessarily make it moral. So empirical knowledge plus the morality of the truth equals factual righteousness with ultimately equal integrity. So what that means is researching, not assuming anything. Look for veracity when you make a decision rather than assumption or perception. How many times have we said, I'm going to do this, and all of a sudden 10 years goes by and you haven't done it? All of another 10 years goes by, and all of a sudden, guess what? It still doesn't get done. We have a tendency to procrastinate. Don't let the ego's lieutenant, I call procrastination, stop you from acting on your thoughts that are positive thoughts that can make a positive difference in your life. There's three quotations that I love from a fellow named Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a theologian, a pastor who lived at the time of the Nazis, actually formed one of the resistances against the Nazis, was not Jewish, but fought against the Nazis. He had three quotations that always stuck in my mind, and they are, kind of relates to everything we're talking about today. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. Absence in the face of evil is itself evil. Every stage and plateau in life we seem to have has the most importance for us, because obviously it's the most relevant for us, because that's where we are in our life. So it has the most importance. But obviously what was important at 25 or 30 may not be so at 45 or 50. Your ideas and what's important can be entirely different, can be the antithesis of what it was when you were 25 or 30. So it's important to, again, getting back to understanding ourselves and understanding where we come from, what are we, and where we're going, not deluding ourselves with ambiguous or thoughts because we don't want to face something, because ultimately facing it initially is going to make us have a better life, the remainder of our life. So what's important for me now at 70 is a lot different than it was when I was 50. So but again, it's relevant for where we are, but we have to try to understand that ourselves so we know and can anticipate in later life what might really be important for us. It goes back to being on purpose and a lot of things that I talked about earlier and a lot of things that I continue to talk about in the book. Intelligence is the ability for what we may have achieved in our life academically. However, wisdom is the comprehension of what's true and right, coupled with one's ability to optimally apply perception, knowledge, judgment, and discernment in our lives. Wisdom is not guaranteed with age, but realized through one's sensitivity to humanity and the universe. Time is passing faster. I have a section, a book on time passing faster. I believe it is passing faster. I explained to you why time is passing faster, and that's part of the urgency in finding our own truth and an understanding and a sensitivity about who we are. The only time we really want to reflect on the past, if it's going to be a positive benefit for us in the present or a positive benefit for us in the future. Otherwise, it's futile. But somehow we have a bizarre satisfaction about reflecting on negative aspects of the past maybe a situation where you say to yourself, and I know I've done this, you must have done this before too, God, I wish I would have said that to him or her then, and if I'd have only done that, then this would have been different, and it doesn't make any difference now. It's over. You can't change it. So if it's negative, forget about it. I've got a technique in the book I call the diversionary thought process. It's a structured way to help you avoid thinking of negative aspects of the past. If I say to you now, don't think of a pink elephant, first thing you think of is a pink elephant. The last 2,000 years that last 1,000 years that somebody celebrated a millennium was the year 1000. So it's been 1,000 years since the last millennium. We lived in the year 2000 through the second millennium. Guess what? The next millennium is the year 3000. Inconceivable when you think about it. Have you ever heard somebody say, the sun's not out today? Sun's out today. Clouds are blocking the sun. It's still out. It's out every day. Love, peace, and joy is here every day. But some of us have more obscurity to seeing it because of our ego. How life can be a natural high. Most of the strength in knowing is about how life can be achieved as a natural high. And we can actually, believe it or not, be high on life itself. Truly. I wish all of you that seek true happiness, find true happiness in your life. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. If anybody has any questions, we got a little time for quick Q&A or any statements. Otherwise, if we can go back outside, if you'd like a book, I'll be out there to help you with a book. Anybody have any questions? Statements, comments? Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say, everything you said, there was so much to listen. I'm sorry. I just want to say, Alan, it was absolutely fabulous.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
After listening to you and thinking of my own life and talking about the past, present, and what to do with the future, I think you have definitely brought to me how to enjoy peace and move on with peace and forget about the negativity, because as you say in your book, people who are negative and that bring that negative energy, and it really does harm me. Therefore, I have chosen to stay away from negative energy. It was a very big decision to say goodbye to your family. But when they're dysfunctional, it's negative. And your book has been very, very big in my life. And I want to thank you for that.
Oh, thank you so much. It's always nice to hear that. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, Alan, I also want to thank you for your comments today. It's a lot of food for thought. I just had a thought about when you talk about the past. I think your point, and I hope I've got this right, was that, it's not like you don't look at the past, because you can learn a lot from the past in terms of looking forward, but you don't want to dwell on it. You want to get what you can get from the past and then move on.
Right. And if the past is going to benefit us in the present, then it's okay,
Right.
If it's going to be a positive. But if it's not going to be positive, it's going to be negative to us in the present, then it's futile to reflect on it. So.
Right, and you don't want to make the point of suppressing things in the past that may affect what you're doing.
Exactly.
You want to get that stuff out on the table and to look at the cards and say, okay, those were the way they were dealt, and now I'm moving on.
You got it.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yes, I have a question about the keratin chanting or meditation you mentioned. Its origin, or where it's originated from. Maybe how many syllables are in the chant.
It's actually a Hindu yogi. It's Hindu, and it depends on the chant. Sometimes the chant might be 5 or 6 or 7 words, and there are maybe 2 or 3 syllables in a word. And it's a Hindu. They're in Hindu, but the paper they give you is transliteration, so you can read it. You're not reading Hindu. You're reading English phonetically that way. So it's easy.
Maybe 20, 30 syllables in the chant.
Yeah, probably so. Yeah. And it's extremely uplifting, because this group and this chant there's a mysticism to it that's hard to describe unless you experience it.
That sounds too difficult.
Yeah.
Oh, it's really simple.
It's simple. It's very simple.
One syllable.
It just
It's very
One syllable.
go to Kirtan one time and you'll see.
How about just you?
Yeah. Well, you said Brad does it here, right? So,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Brad Smith does it here.
yeah. Anybody else? This lady over here, did you have something?
Well, I was just gonna say, just all these things I've been reading lately. Pretty loud. All the things I've been reading lately, you know, I have the Tao Te Ching and just, I always listen to Dr. Dyer. He talks about Patanjali and Rumi and all these things.
Right.
I'm so glad I came today. I'm so glad I talked with you. And like everybody else, these lights, these light bulbs are they just keep going off in my head.
Oh, good.
I keep hearing the same things over and over, and so I'm glad I brought something said when I leave the house this morning, just bring a notebook to write some things down in. So I'm glad I did, and I can't wait to read this book.
Oh, good. Thank you so much.
So
I'm glad you're
Yeah.
interested.
Thank you.
I'm glad it struck a nerve for you. Good. Anybody else?
First of all, Alan, thank you for being here today.
My pleasure.
Everybody truly got a true experience out of this.
Good.
It's a plus in their life.
Thank you very much.
I just have I'm 78, and what's helped me live my life since I turned 50, 55 is it's a slogan, and you almost have the same thing. You can remember the past, but you can't live in the past.
That's exactly right.
And
Yeah.
I want to thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Well, thank you, folks. Thank you very much. Thank you.